Hey, it's Kate Kripke, and welcome to the Motherhood Uncut podcast. Here we are committed to making sure that nobody ever needs to mother alone. We bring to you, wherever you are, the conversations that we need to have to survive and thrive in motherhood, but so often keep silent about. The things that make us laugh, cry, celebrate, rage about, and reflect on. The things that bring tears of sorrow and tears of joy, confusion and wonder, fear and gratitude. We want you to feel good about your mothering and to feel supported along the often clunky adventure of life as a mom. In Motherhood Uncut, you can expect eye-opening conversations with experts in parenting, mental health, and women's health, as well as moving and inspiring conversations with moms who are out there paving the way for their children. You'll likely agree with some of what you hear and also disagree with some of what you hear. All we ask is this, that you come with an open mind and boatloads of compassion for yourself and mothers everywhere. Pull up a chair, pour yourself a glass of wine or a cup of tea, put on your walking or running shoes, turn up the volume in your car during your commute or the pickup line at school. Just show up and mother with us. We have got you. Do you look at all the stuff around your house and feel overwhelmed? Are you tripping over toys, losing track of important papers, or constantly feeling like you can't keep up with organization? Is cleaning up your go-to when you're feeling anxious, or maybe no matter how much you organize and clean, you still feel unsettled inside? Today, I dive deep into internal and external clutter with mom and declutter coach Courtney Florey. Today, we attempt to unravel the interplay between internal and external chaos and what to do about it. I'm Kate Kripke, and this is the Motherhood Uncut podcast. Glad you're here. Motherhood Uncut podcast is sponsored by the One Clock. This is a clock that is actually like one of those clocks that you're going to forever thank. The One Clock is built all on wake science. What is the best way for your nervous system to wake up in the morning? And with the help of researchers, Grammy award-winning musicians, and a whole lot of beautiful style, this One Clock is a sure way to get you back on track towards health and wellness. You can learn more at oneclock.co. Hi, Courtney.
Hi.
Welcome to the Motherhood Uncut podcast. Listeners, I have Courtney Florey here. She is a decluttering coach, and she helps modern women declutter their homes and live lighter, which, by the way, just makes me feel lighter when I hear that entire title. Courtney is also a mom, and I would love for us just to start, Courtney, by you telling us a little bit about you. How old are your kids? In like a nutshell, although maybe we will take this off in some direction, what has your process of becoming a mom been like for you? Let's just get to know you before we jump into this whole question about clutter in motherhood.
Yeah, absolutely. So my son Lane is 15 months old, so I'm still a fairly new mom.
Yep.
And yeah, this journey, man, I've learned so much in motherhood and, in the work that I do, serving moms. I mean, I served moms before I even was a mom. And I had this interesting journey because I was a nanny for years. I mean, probably about 5 years. And so I worked very closely with moms and their kids and their homes, right? Because I was there. And that definitely prepared me as much as I could. It gave me, a little bit more than I would have had, not having done that when I did become a mom. And I nannied for several years for a family with 4 boys. And so it was like, when I found out I was having a boy, I was like, of course I am, of course I was destined to be a boy mom. So, yeah, oh my goodness. The toddler phase, full force, just rough and tumble, all the things. He keeps me on my toes, that's for sure. So learning a lot.
One of the way, Courtney, that you and I connected initially was on Instagram, right? Because we both serve this same community, right? Those busy, modern, often high achieving women who are really struggling in this adjustment to motherhood, or even if they have older kids, it's like the how the heck do I keep my head above water when there's all this stuff happening? One of the things I'm so excited to dive in with you today is this question about where does external and internal chaos overlap, right? What does it look like to be getting those things into congruence so that we feel better? We'll talk about that in a moment. But I guess I'm curious for you, when you actually became a mom, I'm sure you were so good at organizing that as a nanny, so good at organizing that home and keeping everything sane. But what was the biggest surprise for you when you became a mom yourself about what motherhood is really like? Because we don't know till we get there.
Hmm. Yeah. I think really learning how to be a mom, learning like what does that even mean? We don't know, right? Until we're doing it. I think we
Yeah.
hear all of the things, you can read all the books, right? Listen to all the podcasts and get, acquire all of this head knowledge, but you're not doing it until you're doing it, right? And figuring out, okay, what's going to work for me. Of course, doing it together with, my spouse, parenting together, figuring out what that looks like, figuring out, learning my son and what he needs, and just it's yeah, I just think it's really not anything you can prepare for until you're like in the trenches doing it, figuring it out. I mean, you hear that said all the time. I remember I would hear like, moms of 10 plus years say, I still don't know what I'm doing. I'm just figuring it out. And that it's so true.
It's so true. It's so funny when I hear you talking about this. It's almost like if there's a difference between doing and being in motherhood. And I think
Yeah.
if you're a nanny, which so many people have experienced, either babysitting or taking care of their siblings or being more of a full-time nanny for people, most of what you're doing in those roles is doing. You're providing childcare, you're making dinner, you're cleaning up after dinner, you're getting kids or picking them up from activities, right? There's a lot of doing involved. But what we don't know is what it feels like to be a mom, which is way beyond the doing, because that's the mental load, the emotions, all that stuff that if you're taking care of someone else's kids, you don't feel that crap. That is not yours. That is that mom's, right? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Well, and that's the fun part about being a nanny, right? Is you have the fun times. And of course, you clean up the messes and, negotiate the fights and all the things. And so there's that. But, at 5 o'clock or whatever time it is, like you're going home, you can say, see you later, and you can go and, do whatever. But when you're mom, it's like, you can clock out maybe at, 7:30. Maybe. We'll see.
One of the things that I talk about on this podcast in my work all the time, and I guess I think we're maybe moving into this question of clutter, like what do we even mean by clutter? But one of the things that I talk a lot about is how unpredictability, uncertainty, messiness, chaos, it comes with the territory. We can't do ourselves out of that. We can't plan our way out of that, right? We can't problem solve our way out of that because those things just are inherent in the motherhood experience. So I think one of the things that many of us who are sort of more who are doers, right, or who live in our head, or who are problem solvers, spend a lot of time thinking about what can I do to make the unpredictable predictable, to make the uncertain certain, to make the messy organized, to make the chaotic calm. Now, I have a perspective on this, which is to say we can't. Those things will come along for the ride. We can manage, there are some things we can control. I'd love to talk about what control looks like when it comes to organizing our homes and our lives, but we can have control over some things, but not everything. And so I'm curious for you in your life. This is a big question. I'm actually really putting you on the spot here as I say it out loud, but how have you navigated those things? The uncertainty, the unpredictability, the chaos, the mess, like not the mess in the kitchen that goes away when you clean the kitchen, but the mess in life with young children. It's messy, right? It's clunky. How have you navigated those things?
I think good friendships with moms who are in the same season of life. I have
Yes.
one great friend here locally. We're a military family, so we move, and so meeting new people, we have to reestablish these friendships where we go. But I have a great friend who is also a military spouse who has kids, two kids around the same age, and just having someone to not, so many different things. Either meet up and we'll walk, just put the kids in the stroller, let's walk and talk. And process. Oh my goodness, I'm a verbal processor. Being able to just talk through things, motherhood, marriage, what life, whatever it might be, or picking up the phone and sending an audio message. It's just too funny, in the kitchen, kids like, hey, just sending you this quick memo, just in the just real life, real things like that. Getting outside. I know I mentioned walking, but fresh air, moving your body, that has helped a lot too. And reading my Bible for me brings a lot of peace as well in those moments where, like you had said, it's like so many things feel out of control, things feel messy. What can I control, or where can I ground myself and find some peace amidst the chaos?
The chaos. Yeah. There's fascinating data out there. I've talked about this on the podcast about the role that spirituality plays in mental health and well-being. And spirituality can be religious faith and practice, or it can be time in nature or meditation, right? But that having something, Bible, meditation, nature, mantra, whatever it is, to help us feel held in something larger than us when life is so chaotic is incredibly useful, preventative for things like depression and anxiety, and useful in grounding symptoms of depression and anxiety. And, I think that's a whole topic in and of itself. But there is so much we can't control in motherhood that having a sense of it's going to be okay. I am okay. I'm being held in something is so useful for folks. So let's really talk. Let's dive in right now to this idea of clutter. One of the things that I think a lot of our listeners will be able to relate to, I certainly can, is that, well, I'm going to start by telling you a story. When my children were babies, they're now 15 and 17, but when they were babies, we did a remodel in our home. And my husband, who's an artist, wanted, and I was like, fine, I just didn't feel like, whatever, to paint our walls museum grade flat white paint. Okay. So for folks that don't know, museum grade flat white means you can't wash it off, right? It like you wash it and it gives a mark. So it's like museum quality. And we had two young children. And you know what that means. That means that very quickly, there were a lot of fingerprints over everything. And the walls became for me, my red flag as to how I was doing mentally. Because some days I would walk through the door and all I would see is the fingerprints on the wall. That's all I would see. And I would frenetically try to get them up, try to clean it in whatever way I could. Make sure all my kids' hands were clean so they wouldn't leave any other fingertips, like fingerprints, like make sure there was no food being in, kind of micromanaging in order to feel like the walls were being kept clean. On the days when I was resourced, I wouldn't notice. And so my early red flag for how was I doing mentally and internally was how much attention am I paying to the fingerprints on the walls. Now, I think I use that example just as this thing that can happen, which is that so many of the women who I work with will be feeling anxious, will be feeling overwhelmed, will be feeling frenetic, and they will automatically go into doing mode to try to get everything done, to try to organize the home, right? which can feel great temporarily. By the way, I would say it's probably not sustainable organization, right? Because these moms tend to be all or nothing thinkers too, but it's right. So it helps temporarily, but it doesn't last, both because we know what it's like to have a small child. You put all the toys away and 2 minutes later they're on the floor again. And it doesn't last because if there's something that's frenetic inside, we will see the outside environment as frenetic and disorganized and messy. So I guess I want to introduce this conversation, or this part of our conversation, from that place. I'm so curious to know what your thoughts are on that, given your work, given your coaching. How do you make sense of this internal and external connection between how organized we feel and grounded we feel, or how messy and chaotic we feel?
Yeah. I see a lot of women who feel like they're drowning in clutter. And a lot of times they don't even get to, or they haven't yet gotten to organizing or even doing it. Like they know that they need to, they want to, but they're so stuck and they're either feeling paralyzed because they just have so much stuff and they have no idea where to start, or they feel like there's so many things, they feel like they don't have the time, they're not energized, it seems boring. Sometimes it's like, I don't
Another
want to go
thing to
out.
do, right? It's
Yeah,
another thing to do at the end of a long day.
yeah, 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 100%. And so for a lot of the women that I work with, some of them, and I will say too, some of them have tried organizing. And just to clarify too, so organizing and decluttering are almost one and the same, but I do define them differently. Organizing in the way that I talk about it, and what most people do, is putting things in bins and baskets and putting it away, making it look nice, cleaning up. But decluttering is what we really focus on, where it's getting rid of the stuff, right? And so just to clarify that, when I'm talking about it, there are a lot of women who will say, I tried to organize, I went out, I spent hundreds of dollars on bins and baskets, and you know did the thing and put everything away, and what happened? Just like you said, little 2-year-old came out and dumped it on the floor. Or, hey, I needed to find something, so I had to dig through everything and now everything's out again. It's like it, and they'll just say it's just not for me, or I'll never be an organized person, or I'm just not organized enough. And what I always love saying is, you actually don't have to get organized, you just have to get rid of some of your stuff, because when you have fewer things, you have less to manage. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to ever have mess in your home again, because sometimes we'll think, oh, if I just declutter, then I'll never have to, pick up again. And that's just not true. But it becomes a lot easier, and the physical load, but your mental load is also lighter too, because you're not looking around at all the piles and the boxes and everything thinking, okay, tonight, I have to do this. Or trying to rest, put the kids down, you're trying to rest, but you're looking around feeling like you can't. This is me. I can't. If there's dishes in the sink, it's like, no, I need to do everything before I can rest. I cannot rest until those things are done, because I'm thinking about it. I know it's, I'm looking at it. I know it's there. And I think that's what happens a lot of time with clutter, when we see it visually and then we just, it doesn't go away. It's not checked off that list until it's done. But sometimes it's so overwhelming, and then it's like, where do I even start?
I love so much about what you're saying. You talked about feeling paralyzed, which I think is a feeling that many of our listeners will be able to relate to. And, again, from a psychological perspective, paralysis is a physiological and brain response to threat. Fight, flight, freeze. Paralysis is freeze. And so what we want to remember is that feeling of paralysis that happens when we look around and don't know where to start is that something in our thoughts is telling us something bad is happening here. Something dangerous is happening. And again, we're not thinking in those words necessarily, but I do want to sort of remind our listeners, because I think this is a place that you and I can blend our expertise. We want to remind our listeners that that feeling of paralysis is coming as a threat response to something. So what we want to be asking ourselves is, what are we feeling threatened by? Are we telling ourselves that, I mean, one thing we could be telling ourselves is, I'm not an organized person. I'm not organized enough. That kind of self-criticism, it's not my home is disorganized, I am disorganized. That's going to trigger a threat response, right? Having a disorganized home doesn't have to be a crisis, because there's something that we can actually do about that, which is where you come in. I am a disorganized person. Now we're talking about our sense of self. And I think that's what I want to really help our listeners be clear on. That I'm a disorganized person, putting the toys in the bins and reorganizing your closet is not going to help with that. It might help temporarily, but if we still believe that it's me that's disorganized, we're going to keep trying to organize things, and it's going to be like being a gerbil on a treadmill. The moment we can understand that there's a difference between those two things, if we have a disorganized home or a cluttered home, we can do something about that. And you and I are going to talk about that in a moment. What can people do? If the idea or the thought is, I am disorganized, I am cluttered inside, cleaning up the dishes, organizing the junk drawer is not going to help that in a sustainable way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a really interesting place to get curious and to ask our listeners to get curious. So I also love the distinction you're making between organizing and decluttering, because, I mean, how often is it that we just acquire so much shit at this stage of our life? And that's the other thing, is that we can feel pretty bad, anxious, lonely, irritated, despairing, and think, I just need that thing and then I'll feel better. So talk to us more about what it means from your perspective to declutter an environment, your environment.
So, what I've learned over the years is that it's less about rules or following a specific method or system, and more about, honestly, I mean, it's for some people, it might feel a little loosey goosey, or, what do you mean? It really is about just getting rid of stuff. I mean, I have learned, and what I teach is how to make decluttering simple. Let's not overcomplicate things. We do that enough as is. I'm great at that sometimes, and it's like, wait, I have to remind myself. No, keep it simple. Like, why are we making this so much harder than it has to be? And we do this a lot of the time with decluttering, with other things too, where we make it out to be this big thing in our head, right? We keep pushing it off. I'll do it later. I can't, it's too much. When in reality, if we took small steps, we could actually make a lot of progress, but we can get into that later. So what does it look like to declutter your environment? So instead of focusing on having a certain amount of things, because there are some people who might recommend, give kind of more like hard rules, 3 pairs of jeans, 10 tops, and that can just feel unattainable. And I think for a lot of people, they feel like they either will never be organized, or they could never be a minimalist, or they could never declutter, because the rules just feel too strict, or
Yeah,
it just doesn't feel like something they could do.
it's
Right.
really rigid. That type of thinking is so rigid. And from where I sit in the mental health field, any rigid thinking is a sign of anxiety. So only 5 pairs of this, get rid of all of this. I should do this. I should do that. That to me is a symptom or a sign that someone's feeling a lot of internal anxiety, right? It's so interesting as I hear you talking. I think one thing that can be really useful for people is to ask this very important question, which is what's the difference between wanting something and needing something? So to truly declutter, if we were going to really declutter in a rigid way, which we are not advising people to do, someone might say, I'm going to get rid of everything that I don't need, that I don't need, right? So anything that's a want and not a need, I'm going to get rid of. That's going to leave us with very few things. We actually don't need a lot, right? I think that question, do I need this thing or do I want this thing, is an important question. By the way, it's okay to keep something or buy something because you want it. But what happens, I think, in this time of life is that because we don't, or this 2024, because we don't know how to sit with the deep discomfort that's happening inside, we buy into consumerism. And we think, well, I want to feel good, so I'm going to buy that thing because I think it's going to make me feel better. And then it might make us feel better for a day. But then we're right back to where we were. And then we just have that thing on the shelf somewhere.
Yes, I
So
can talk.
what's coming up for you?
Yeah, this is something that I talk about a lot in just, yeah, the work that I do, because you can get rid of all of this stuff, but if you don't check your habit of consuming, shopping, bringing things in, then you just end up where you started. And sometimes I'll have people say, I decluttered and, it's been a month and now I have more. And, so it's not always shopping. Sometimes it's just life. I mean, you bring things into the house, that happens. But a lot of the time I will ask, okay, what are your spending habits like? What are you buying? And you're right. It's tough. It's so tempting. I mean, social media, ads everywhere, TV. I mean, what have you? I think for a lot of my clients, it's social media, it's Instagram. We see the ads or influencers or just people sharing stuff, and we think, oh my gosh, that looks awesome. I want to try that. Sometimes it's a want. Sometimes it's simply and we don't always realize it. But when you get to the root, sometimes it's a lot deeper. Like, I want to fit in. I want to belong. I want to feel confident in my body. And so I'm going to, get these clothes. I don't want to feel like an outsider.
And Courtney, those are needs: belonging, confidence,
Yeah.
security. Those are needs. And it's
Yeah.
so interesting how we can say, we might even use this word, oh my gosh, I need that. We see an ad on Instagram, oh my God, I need that thing. And what we're looking for is a feeling. And we're telling ourselves that that thing is going to give us the feeling we're looking for of belonging, of confidence, of comfort, whatever that is. That, I think, probably is what leads to the most clutter of things in people's lives, that we have this knee-jerk reaction that if I buy that thing or have that thing, I will feel the way I'm wanting to feel. That's not how it works, at least sustainably. Again, don't get me wrong. I love how it feels to put on a new sweater.
Yeah.
But in a week, I'm going to be telling myself, I need another new sweater, right? Or whatever the thing is, a new water bottle, a new whatever, new container, like Target. I go into Target and I'm like, I just need to go get toilet paper. I swear to you, I see 50 things in that store that I tell myself I need.
Yeah.
Didn't know
It's
I needed
hard.
them until I saw them.
Yeah. And I think that, those decisions in the moment can cost that, not just money, it can cost us money, but our time, our energy. And that's something that comes up a lot too, is when people are going rid of things, they'll get hung up on, but I spent money on this. I bought all of these things. I feel like if I get rid of these things, I'm throwing the money away. I'm wasting the money. And I always say the money was spent when you bought the item, when you decided, I'm going to purchase this, when you exchange your money for the item in the store. That's when you spent it. 2 years later, you haven't used it or whatever, and you're like, okay, I think I need to declutter it, but I spent the $50 on it. Okay, well, you already spent the money. You can either and then we go on to like, do you want to take the time to try and resell it and get, $15 for it? No, I don't think I do. Okay, well, you can make a choice. Do you want to hold on to it, just almost in either fear or regret, or just feeling like, well, I spent the money and so I can't let it go. Like, is that serving you? Is living in that mindset helping, or is it just making you feel anxious? You're tripping over stuff, you're coming to me because you're overwhelmed, but you're like, I don't know, I spent the money. And so I always encourage my clients to think, okay, yeah, it cost you X amount of dollars, but what else is it costing you? Your sanity, your time. I mean, dealing with it every day, picking up things, like, is that worth it to you?
We're not taught to ask ourselves this question. I'm going to stay right now with compassion, not with blame and shame, but with compassion. What part might I be playing in the things that aren't working for me? I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling full. I'm feeling paralyzed. Okay, well, it's possible that holding on to that thing that you no longer use, that you're tripping over every day, is part of what's leading to those feelings, right? So the question what you're talking about is a very similar question that I ask my clients to consider, because there's so much we can't control in motherhood or in life, that we want to be able to really get so honest, again, with compassion. This is not a shame and blame. This is not when you blame yourself for having spent the $50 on the thing. That's not helpful. But to really ask, how do I want to feel? And what are the choices I can make, the thoughts I can engage in, the choices I can make that are going to get me closer towards that feeling? All of our listeners, I'm assuming, will be able to relate to this. I want to feel calm. I want to feel grounded. I want to feel organized. That's different than being organized, by the way, right? I want to feel organized. So for our listeners, as we talk about the decluttering piece, I think what you and I would agree on, we've talked about this before, is in a perfect world, when people are really committing to their internal and external health and well-being, they're decluttering both internally and externally, right? So that there's a congruence, there's an alignment. They're not having the running around trying to have the perfectly organized, decluttered home where inside they're falling apart and feel like they can't think straight, and right. And they're not trying to focus on trying to feel better when their external environment is chaotic, because we need them both to be in alignment. What are a couple of, I think you've already mentioned a few, but what are a couple of tools or strategies for people who are listening that's like, yes, this is me. I have so much stuff in my house that's in my way, that's getting in my way of feeling the way I want to feel. What would you say to them? How would you advise them? Where can they start?
Yeah. So first, take the pressure off to do it all at once. I know we talked about this, and I know if you're listening, you probably are a high achiever, right? Who wants to dive in. You've decided. It takes a lot. A lot of the time, it takes a lot to get to that point where you're ready. You're finally ready to do it. And so now it's like, let's go. I'm going to do it all in a day. And when we do that, we burn out so quickly. I mean, this can apply to so many things, right? We try and just, we're trying to eat the elephant all at once instead of a bite at a time. So, take the pressure off to have everything done right away, because it is going to take time. And I will say, decluttering is a journey. It's something that you will be on forever, because we have to do it continually, because we always have things coming into our home, right? It's not a one and done. It's not, I do it once and then it's over. It's something we work at. But it gets easier in time, especially once you've done what I call the initial purge, where you've gone through the whole house, right? And then after that, hopefully it's just maintenance mode, where you still have stuff to get rid of, but it's not the 10 trash bags maybe that you took the first time. It's maybe one or two, and you're doing it more frequently. And it also becomes more of a habit. And that's where I'm at right now, where, I'll see things, and instead of like, it's interesting. I have to almost I have to learn from my clients how they think, because it's so ingrained now for me to just see something, a shirt in my closet, and just think, oh, I don't wear that, put it in the bag. Instead of thinking, oh, I'm going to do it once a quarter or yearly, I'll go through and do a big purge. It becomes just this natural thing where you're making these just quick decisions here and there. And so my hope is that, everyone can get to that point one day. It is more sustainable, or I should say it's a sustainable way to declutter versus all at once. So take the pressure off and start with a place that where decision making is going to be easy. So let's not go out into the garage and dig into the sentimental things. Let's probably not, maybe that's not the closet, but maybe that's a kitchen drawer, a junk drawer, medicine cabinet. I mean, somewhere where your fridge, somewhere where okay, I can get rid of expired food, expired medicine. It's not really going to be a hard thing. Decisions were going to be relatively easy compared to sentimental things. And make some progress, because you want to build that momentum. You want those quick wins. You want to feel good about it, right? Because after you've done it, you can visually see, and I love this about declutter, you can visually see that progress, right?
Feels
It
good
feels
right
so
away.
good. Yes, you get your before and after photo if you want to, right? It's like, okay, this is great. And then you sit back and you think, okay, I can do this. I can make progress. And then you're done. You pat yourself on the back and you move on. And then the next day, it's not even a daily thing, but whenever it is, when you're like, okay, ready to do more, you can do that next task. Another thing is picking a small area, like maybe micro space. Not, don't go in and say, okay, I'm going to do my whole bedroom, but maybe you're going to do the nightstand. And when it's done, you're done. And sometimes you're going to build up that momentum and feel like, no, I actually want to do more. I feel really good. And you'll do a little bit more. Other times you're like, nope, that's good. I've done it. And, I'll move on when I get the chance. And you can do that. So I think starting there to build momentum is so key. And then you can work up towards the things that are a little bit harder. And by then, you'll probably feel pretty confident and you'll feel empowered. Like, okay, I've done so much. I can totally do this.
That's one of the things I love about what you're saying is that we're looking for a feeling. We tell ourselves we're looking for an organized house. What we're looking for is a feeling. And we can get that feeling very quickly by decluttering or organizing a junk drawer or a shelf, or right. It's pretty quickly that we can have that feeling. And the more we have that feeling, the more we want more of that feeling, the more likely we are to do it again. Question that I really love, and it's just a little bit of like psychology in here. Limiting beliefs get in our way. And if I'm telling myself I am a disorganized person, I will continually make unconscious choices that make my life feel disorganized, right? That's just that limiting belief, confirmation bias, a lot of brain functions that work into that. So I'm imagining a question someone could ask themselves, Courtney, is, if I believed I was organized, what choices would I make about this junk drawer or this pantry or this child's bookshelf? If I believed I was organized, what choice would I make? It's sort of like what I think about when you're talking about the like clothing. I mean, someone said to me once, and it was like such a obvious thing, but such an eye opener. They said, what would it be like to just put something away once? You come home and you put your bag on the table, like you put it away on the table, and then you have to come back and put it away later in the shoe room or whatever it is. Like, what would it be like to just put something away once, rather than having to keep coming back and doing the next step and the next step and the next step? And I think that's part of what you're talking about. Once you have enough decluttering in your space, enough organizing in your space, you can keep acting as if you're an organized person, quote unquote. What would she do? What would that version of me who only kept things that I really wanted and needed, what choice would she make about this vase that I haven't used in wherever that I keep having to move on my shelf. That's me. I've got like 10 freaking vases. I don't need them. They're not expensive, but I keep moving them from one shelf to another and they take up space, right? Not a helpful use of space. But so much of our motivation to do things externally comes from how we're talking to ourselves internally. So I love what you're saying about, really believing that it's possible, really giving ourselves permission to do one small thing at a time, and to recognize pretty quickly that we're going to feel better pretty quickly, even if it's not decluttering a whole house.
Yeah.
And it's motivating. What I hear you talking about, which I didn't realize when we first started talking about, is you're really talking about proactive organization and decluttering, not reactive organization and decluttering, right? If I've had a bad day and I'm feeling anxious, I'm going to try to organize and declutter my external environment as a reaction to how I feel.
Yeah.
But you're motivating women to proactively think about, what can I do in my environment that will make it less likely that I end up feeling overwhelmed and anxious?
Yeah.
It's a different motivation, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You've given me so much insight into my own work. This is amazing. Yeah, that's so true.
So I have a personal question for you. This question of decluttering is probably one of the top things my husband and I argue about. It's hilarious. I am a keeper of things that from an emotional place. I have like boxes of art that my children made when they were like 5 that I don't need to be keeping, right? I'm like, I collect like little rocks that I find, or, just I love candles. I mean, it's stuff that like I feel some emotional attachment to. I married someone who is like an essentialist. He won't buy things he doesn't need. Rarely will he buy something he wants but doesn't need. His side of the bed is like there's nothing on the bedside table. My side of the bed is I have like 6 beds and 3 rocks that I love and maybe 2 pairs of glasses, right? So what do you say to someone like me? What would you this is seriously something, and I'll get mad because he'll be like, he will box things up when I'm gone. And I'm like, where's my candle? And he's like, put them away. He's decluttered my stuff. And it makes me so mad. But what can you tell me? Because I know that I'm going to have a different bandwidth for decluttering than he does. And I know that certain things matter to me that don't matter to him. How do you advise your clients in situations like this? And let me also say one more thing is I also know that I don't need to hold on to, like, I know that I create clutter for myself and that doesn't feel good either. Right.
Yeah. So what would you feel like if you had and maybe you have this, but if you had a finite space, a box, and whatever it might be, where you had those things. So I know you said some of the things you have out and maybe you like to see them there, right? Like the rocks or different things that remind you of that time or the memory, right? Because I think that's what it is for a lot of people.
Totally.
Yeah, it's the stuff, but it's what
feeling.
reminds us of, yeah, exactly, the feeling, the memory.
Right.
So maybe, and not necessarily boxing it all up and putting it away, but something that I advise to clients who have a lot of sentimental things or things that they want to keep, but they just aren't sure, what to do with, is having that finite space where they can have the things, again, that fit in the box or fit in the space. And then after that, they have to make some decisions on, okay, well, I don't have any more room, in my box. So what can I pull out? Because maybe there's something new that I want to put in that's more valuable, or what can I make room for? Or, oh, maybe there's not room in the box and maybe it doesn't fit in there, Um, that way you still have some things that you love, right? Because it's not about, okay, I can't ever have anything sentimental, because that's not living, a joyous life. It's not about getting rid of everything. But if you're finding yourself, I'm overwhelmed, I'm creating more work for myself, okay, then we have to find a solution. And so where can you kind of meet in the middle, like what you said, of having those things that bring you joy, and knowing, okay, there's going to be things that are meaningful to me that aren't to my husband. I'm sure we can all, that applies to all of us. But how can I treasure and honor and value these things without, causing more, like creating work or causing more clutter for myself at the end of the day? Does that make sense?
It makes so much sense, Courtney. And you're making me think of two things. One is that now we're getting out of the all or nothing thinking again. Where it's like, it's not clutter versus no clutter, whatever. That no one likes clutter. So maybe it's not all things versus no things, right? But it's like, it's reminding me in my work, it's how can we create lack of structure in your day within the structure of your day, right? How
Yeah.
can we create disorganization or quote unquote clutter within the organization of your home? So for me, I mean, I'll just speak personally. I have our bedside tables have drawers. And again, my husband has like, I mean, I'm making him sound, he has like glasses and earplugs and stuff, but they're like lined up in the freaking drawer. It's like mine things are just shoved in there, but it's mine. He doesn't need to go into my drawers, right?
Yeah.
From the outside, it looks closed, right? I have a I have a rare, very steady meditation practice, and in my office back in Colorado, I have like an area where I put all of my special things. It's my area. He does not get to tell me what I can and can't have there, right?
Yeah.
So I think that is a really wise both and. It's like, yes, you can have the stuff, but think about where to keep it so that it's within the organization and structure of a more predictable home. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. That's why I love this conversation. It is one way to make life feel more predictable is to have some predictability about where to find things.
Yeah.
Where are you going to keep things? If you've got too much stuff, you're not going to find those things. So the other thing I want to just mention, which really would probably take us a whole other hour to talk about, but I think it's worth just naming for our listeners is, I think because we put so much meaning in things, because things hold so much emotion for us, we can feel a lot of fear around the idea of letting things go. And I do think in part, this is where the internal psychological mental health work goes. What am I telling myself about this thing? And why do I believe that I need to have this thing in order to remember that event or feel this certain way or stay connected to that person or whatever it is? Because in truth, it's just a thing.
Yeah.
It's a thing that's holding emotion for us. And I think as long as we have this assumption that the thing holds the meaning and emotion versus us holding the meaning and emotion, it's going to be terrifying to let things go. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And I do see that a lot, where it is hard to get rid of things that, maybe heirlooms that were passed down from a family member who has passed away. And, I've had women say, I just don't know what to do with the item. It's not something that we're going to use. It doesn't fit the style of our home, whatever it may be. But I feel like if I get rid of it, I'm dishonoring, grandma, or she might, what if she was here, she'd be upset or whatever. And it can be tough, because you're right. It is just the couch or the vase or whatever it might be. That's just what it is. But because it does hold the memories and the emotions and the feelings and all the things we've talked about, it can feel like getting rid of that item almost is like getting rid of the person from your life, or, you know, um, it can feel like that connection or relationship isn't there anymore because you don't, you haven't kept the thing. And something that I think about is, well, would that person, and everyone's answer is going to be different, but would that person want you living in guilt and fear over something that was, just an item that was theirs? Like, would they want you feeling this way? Probably not. I don't think they would, right? And so
I
some,
think
so
it's so good. It also goes into like ourselves. So I'm thinking about if you were helping someone declutter their closet, which I'm sure you do a lot of, we hold on to versions of ourselves. Well, I don't want to let that pair of jeans go that are too small for me now because I want someday to be able to fit
right.
back into those jeans. And I think, again, that's where we accumulate. It's sort of like, okay, there's so much grief. There's so much loss and grief that goes into change, whether it's changing of our bodies or changing from one home to another home or changing from the loss of a person passing away. There's so much that we hold on to. And I think when we carry that load emotionally or practically, we're going to feel more cluttered internally
Yeah.
or externally. And so I think there's a lot of courage and bravery that goes into decluttering. My mom died 8 years ago, and God bless her. My mom was an amazing human and a powerhouse. But when my brother and I went to go clean out her stuff, I was like, here are all the glasses you've told yourself you've lost. Here's a freaking all over. There's a box of like 27 pairs of eyeglasses or pens or special rocks or and then the challenge was that I was left, my brother and I were left to dispose of them. And I will tell you right now, that was a painful experience. And it also felt so good when we finally decided to just get rid of it all. But it's sort of like, it's not just a gift to ourselves. I think it's a gift to all of the people whose lives we share to declutter, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just talking with my own grandparents the last month, and we were talking about that specifically my grandma's parents when they passed away. They were responsible for going through the house, right, and doing the estate sale and getting, deciding what things needed to stay and go. And they said, and this is so, it was so just made me so happy, but they said, we will not do this for our kids. My parents, we will not leave them with all these decisions to be made and all this work to do. And over the past few years, they've done a lot of decluttering, which is so cool. But I think sometimes it is those experiences sometimes where you either, have to learn the hard way, or you just have to, you do these things and you're like, that wasn't fun. I don't want to do this again. Let's make a change.
Yeah, I mean, so many things are now coming to mind that I hadn't even thought about. If only we are going to wrap up in a minute, but it's like when our kids get older, as our kids grow up, decluttering by letting go of old toys or old clothes or old books. Again, it's like we want to hold on because of the memory.
Yeah.
It can be so hard and painful to declutter in that way and let things go. And yet, Courtney, I think what I hear you saying is that the holding on to those things over time is what causes the paralysis that we feel when we don't know where to start because there's too much stuff. And so it is this process, isn't it, of taking action to declutter one drawer at a time, one closet at a time, one box at a time, with doing some real internal work around how can I shift my thinking? How can I tend to myself? How can I manage my nervous system so that I'm willing and able to do these small tasks that ultimately are going to make me feel so much better, like the amount of time and space we suddenly have after we've decluttered, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much that goes into that. The decision making, the doing the work, right? It's so much more. And I've learned this over the years. It's so much more than just putting stuff in a trash bag and driving it off to Goodwill, right? It's everything that we've talked about, a lot of the insight that you've shared. It's digging up all of the stuff, not the physical stuff, digging up the mental clutter, emotional, whatever it is inside of us that needs to come out and be addressed before we can really confidently make those decisions on what's going to stay and what's going to go. Because sometimes we don't know until we've addressed what's really going on inside.
Totally. So Courtney, if we have listeners here who are like, yes, I need help with this. I'm ready. I'm ready to declutter. I'm ready to get rid of that stuff I've been holding on to. I'm ready to organize that junk drawer. I'm ready to figure out my playroom or my closet, and they don't know where to start. And they really want some coaching and handholding. Where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Declutter Dwell. Lots of content there. And then you can also find me at I run a membership community called the Simplicity Society, and that is where we literally declutter together. We get on Zoom and we get rid of stuff and we talk through it and we laugh and talk about motherhood while we do it. I mean, it's fun. We make decluttering fun. I know it seems, I always joke and say like, it's not, the sexiest chore on the list, but it can be fun when you do it with other people.
Totally. Amazing. So we'll put all of that in the show notes so that people can access you quickly and easily. Thank you so much for this conversation today. In the last couple of moments here together, is there any other advice, anything you want to make sure that our listeners know?
When it comes to decluttering, I want you to remember at the end of the day how you want to feel in your home, how you want your family to feel in your home, and how the things inside of your home are playing a part of that. Because sometimes we don't always think they're connected. But as we've talked about, if you want to feel calm, you want to feel at peace, you want to feel more organized, yet you feel like you're drowning, and you may think the things in your house are helping you, right? Like we've mentioned, making you feel more confident or making you feel like you fit in or belong or whatever that might be. I just encourage you to take a minute to just look around and assess kind of as a whole, just generally, how are those things making you feel? And if it's overwhelmed or behind or like you're failing or whatever it may be, because I hear that one a lot, like I feel like I'm failing because I can't keep my house clean, but I want a calmer space. I want you to think about the value of those things and if it really is worth the space it's taking up in your house, the physical space, but also the mental space, and how heavy that weight might be. Because if it's not worth it, then I say get rid of it and clear some of that space for what really matters to you. Again, yes, the physical space, but also the breathing room, to have clarity, to have space to breathe in your home, because some people feel like they can't. And I want that for you.
Amazing. Do the hard things now so that you feel better later.
Yes.
Love it. Courtney, thank you for your time today. It's so nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, if you loved this episode and enjoy this podcast, please just take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review, and send it to one mom out there who you think might benefit. When you do that, you help to make sure that no woman out there ever feels like they have to mother alone. Thank you.